Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer1745 here with my continuing look at Black Ice for Hearts of Iron 4. So far, I'm liking it. Yes, with everything I have quibbles. That isn't really the point, and I always hope my quibbles will be answered, but I am so far very much enjoying the game. If anybody from the dev team hears this, good work so far. If you're new here, I hope I'm earning your subscription. And everybody, if you can, lick the like button. Tastes different for each video, so you only need to lick it once just to see what it tastes like. So, yeah, if you do that. And what is Frog Eyes saying? It may have been a focus done by either Ireland or Britain. Yeah, to me, that is so historically unrealistic that without a German declaration of war or some really strange thing happening, we could war game out how Ireland might, but I don't think it should. I mean, again, if we I don't see any conditions, with France still in the war, Ireland would want to be at peace. They're not feeling that threatened by Germany. In fact, they might be wanting Germany to take the British Empire down a peg or two still. So I don't know. British good decision to try to get the Irish in, don't they? Well, but it should always fail. I mean, meaning the AI should always say no. And so if you're a human player, you might say yes. But AI should say no. Okay. Our victory in France is nearly complete. The French government has asked for an armistice, and our diplomats have prepared terms which they have agreed to. They will retain control of southern France while we are free to occupy the rest. So we can do the second armistice at Compiègne. Not a bad photo. I think it's colorized. Pretty sure. I'm not absolutely sure. But you could have put a nice photo of Compiègne. They're probably black and white. Well, they have some color photos of Compiègne too. Should have done a Compiègne photo. But yeah, conquering Germans going down a French street, that isn't bad. Or you can do all. Now, let's talk about this shortly. Arno, you don't need the Atlantic Wall until the Americans show up. So historically, why was this worthwhile to Hitler? That's sort of where I was going to get into. We were talking earlier in the stream, I think before ZZ showed up. Yes, I'm doing this live. You guys watching it later, cool. But we talked about how it would have been better for Germany to not invade Norway. And I said at the time that, so no, not everyone watches everything. When the invasion of Norway is planned and started, the Germans aren't necessarily anticipating defeating France in any sort of quick victory, because France is clearly the military superpower of the world. It is clearly that. Now, obviously, it ends up being not true, but it seems like it is. We can talk, and it's not just the plan that von Manstein comes up with, to allow the mobile forces to move into Belgium, French and British mobile forces to move into Belgium and then cut them off. I mean, that's brilliant and great all. But I've talked earlier and many other times about the command and control and other elements that the German army has that maybe the British Expeditionary Force mostly has, but France doesn't. France is just, out of its depth in a mobile war, in a current modern mobile war at the time. That's why they lose. Germany doesn't know that this is going to happen. This is not a sure thing by any means, and they're not anticipating that this is gotta happen. So it looks like there's good reason to go into Norway when there really isn't, because Germany can probably put enough pressure on Norway to keep the Swedish steel flowing once France collapses. Now, Vichy France, and even whether historically, but also potentially in the game. Germany occupies, let's just say, roughly half of France geographically, roughly. probably about 70% of the population they occupy of France, and easily 70%, 80% of France's industry. France's industry is sort of in the northern part of France, at least at this time. This is very rural, and a lot of these areas down here are somewhat underpopulated. You know, Paris is sort of the mega city. Yeah, there's some other big cities down here, but it's a huge part of the population. Now, France or Germany has unexpectedly won the war really fast. Now, what you know, it's sort of like now the lion, you know, jumps on the back of the elephant and bites its teeth into the elephant. And you know, just whether this is or could be a rhino or whatever, doesn't really matter. But let's just say the teeth doesn't really get into anything vital. It's wounded, but it's not like a big gushing blue. You know, it's not near any major arteries. It's not, you know, it's not going to kill it. Not going to bring it down. Now, what is the lion going to do? It's riding on the back of an elephant or a rhino or whatever, you know, and it's sort of hooked on. What, you know, oh my God, I was successful. And the elephant's looking for a tree to go rub against to knock this lion off of it, you know. So, you know, it's caught, the lion's caught something it doesn't know what to do with. Well, that's sort of what the Germans are going to do. There are millions of people in France, and how are you going to control all of that? They're nowhere near set up, you know, as in a security state apparatus to go do this right now. They're not set up to do this. They quickly start scrambling to do it, but at first it is very much a military occupation. You know, just let's and they you can and I've been trying to collect and more information about the Germans running around trying to collect rifles and artillery pieces and tanks and whatnot from, you know, everywhere. But there's lots of maybe not tanks or aircraft, but a few prototype vehicles are disappearing, you know, after the French collapse, that mysteriously come out of hiding after the Allies have taken over. Prototypes to then become manufactured in the 50s, stuff that they were developing that they hide away. But, you know, but people are taking, you know, farmers or soldiers are just taking off their uniforms and becoming farmers again and disappearing with their guns, you know. So how do you control all of this? Well, the best way to do it is get the French to control it for you. Hitler, yes, he's a nutter. Okay, we're not discussing whether Hitler has not. I mean, later in life he loses touch with reality. Yes, but at this point, he is very much in touch with reality. But he has nutty ideas, and yes, he's evil. I mean, he's both evil and has nutty ideas. Unlike, well, Himmler is also evil and nutty and whatnot too, but Himmler wants to see a pan-European grand empire with the Germans ruling over it. Hitler wants to see a much more of a German exclusion zone, meaning they even talk about, you know, how do Berlin fashions not Paris fashions, you know. Women don't pay attention to what they're doing in Paris. Check out the Berlin fashion designers. I'm not a fashion person, but they don't look like they don't look as stylish. And I sort of like 1930s styles for men and women clothing, but they don't look nearly as stylish to me as the French does. So some of the stuff is sort of counterproductive, shall we say, in it doesn't work out. You know, women still follow Paris fashion and whatnot, but Hitler really wants to sort of separate out the Germanic Aryan race as its own sort of separate thing, and does not want, you know, we can talk about what's going to happen in the East, and I'm going to stay away from, I mean, it's brutal and negative and all bad and all that, but and he definitely wants to expand territory. And again, there is not within the Nazi hierarchy, there are multiple views, and I don't know, because now Hitler's view, Hitler likes to have people with competing ideas in different organizations competing with each other and to see how they work out to then which one he picks. I think, again, Himmler sort of wants to have an SS or Nordic German aristocracy ruling over Eastern peasants that are strict non-miscegenation laws, meaning you don't have sex with the inferior peoples. And so just sort of, a German aristocracy, where I think Hitler and some of the other guys are thinking, remove these people, whether into a camp to disappear into the camp, you know what I mean, or whether just to ship them further east, ship them further east, or probably a mix of whatever. But remove the people and have Germans living as, blood and soil, just the Germans doing the German thing and not being an elite ruling over others, because I think he sees that as sort of corrupting. But I'm not saying that what would have become, because but Hitler does change his mind over time on philosophy and things. So it isn't just one thing at one point. But Hitler, in my opinion, does not want to rule over France. Yes, and they do take back the territory lost at the end of World War I. And Hitler very much may be willing to take over eventually places like, the Netherlands and maybe, up into the Nordic states. But he really doesn't want to rule over Italy. He definitely doesn't want, and we can talk about the Reich Kolonialbund, which is advocating returning of German colonies. But mostly, shall we say, he doesn't want Germans to rule over other peoples. He likes that he never goes to Britain. He's never seen the British Empire up close, but he likes his sort of idea of the British Empire ruling over the inferior peoples of the world. And this is Hitler's nutty idea, not what I think or think that they're inferior. I'm just, again, I want to caution, because sometimes people are new and maybe thinking what I'm saying is what I believe, not what I'm trying to interpret others or what is historical fact as they viewed it. He really believes that Britain is somehow specially designed, that it is an Aryan race. It is part of it, but they're a bit different than our Aryans or whatever, and they're set up and they should rule over the lesser peoples of the world like they do and sort of be the colonial masters, while Germany is sort of at its heart and going to be its, exclusionary strength. So whether it's, again, people spread around the world or just other parts of Europe, because he hates with a burning passion the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And again, this is, I look at this, and so I'm interpreting Hitler here to some degree, and not just necessarily what he either has written or what he has, people have recorded that he says. I'm interpreting this because I know he hates the Austro-Hungarian Empire because it is a cosmopolitan empire. He hated Vienna and living there. Now, maybe a lot of that comes from him being out of work and living there, so he hates that being poverty. But he looks around and sees lots of non-Germans. Vienna is, a very mixed culturally place of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, not of the world. It's not like London, who has, back in the 1940s, only a smidgen of it compared to what it is now, but people from, all over the British Empire living there. He sees this as Vienna, and as part of the negativity that he has towards Vienna is all these other non-Germans, Hungarians and Czechs and Slavs of whatever, and, Italians from, Italian possessions or, whatever, all living in Vienna, and he hates this. So I'm, to some degree, interpreting this idea that he does not want this for Germany. He does not want a German elite intermixing daily with other peoples, even, genetically or just culturally and socially. He wants it to exclusion. So I don't think he wants France. He may want to push the borders even more than they did at some point. He may want to push out certain peoples from certain areas, but he does not want France. Now, so France is going to get to exist. So like I say, you want the French to rule themselves. You want the Paris police to maintain public order. so that you can have your parades, and they make sure that no one snipes at the guys in the parade, and maybe not, just everybody calm down, and also to give the idea of, well, why shoot at a German sitting alone by the side of the road, after occupation? Why? Because if you do that, they may go pull 20 people out of various homes, or just, well, they do that too, especially later, but they may just take 20 prisoners, not necessarily like maybe hostage prisoners, just go take hostages. They do that. And I don't know. I know this all happens at somewhere in the German Empire, not necessarily always in France. So don't take this exclusively as France. But they'll either take hostages, or they will specifically have round up people that are likely to cause trouble, like known communists, known socialists, known whatever. And so one of the tactics is if, somehow after occupation, a German soldier winds up, shot or stabbed or whatever, they'll go pull a bunch of people out of prison that are not thought of as like low criminals, but just people that are been collected, and shoot a bunch of them. So why do that if you believe in, 5 years or so, when the war with Britain is over, Paris will be liberated simply because Germany will leave, because Germany is not going to stay. Germany has no, and I believe, now things may change. Hitler may die. Well, obviously he does, will die eventually, but Hitler may have been assassinated. There were attempts, obviously, about those, some of them. He could have been bombed. There's all kind, just health reasons. He could just die, and then whether it's Goering taking over or somebody else taking over, the Nazi state could become very different than it would have been under Hitler. But I see it under Hitler. He doesn't want France. So why die for Paris when you're going to have Paris anyways? And the Germans are not. And again, I do need to read Adam Tooze's book and some of the vampire economy. But for the most part, I don't see them plundering France for industrial machinery. They're definitely putting it to work for the war effort in France, but they're also trying to use French labor to do this. So they're not like, they're definitely stealing artwork. But, much of the real French national artwork is hidden away. Not in German hands. Much of it is. Most of the really famous stuff, like out of the Louvre or whatever, is been hidden away. The Germans never get their hands on it. It's a lot of it is in private collections that the Germans get their hands on. Great movie, watch it, Monuments Men, and it sort of covers some of the stuff. But it's not being terribly plundered as what it could be, not like what it happens in the East. So why, and really in 1940 and through to 41, particularly until the invasion with Russia, and even really until 42, and the Americans are really in it, not just that they've joined the war. There's really not a lot. There's organizing going on, but there's really not a lot of resistance activity. And so, because I'll tell you, me personally, if I truly believe that Germany's going to leave in a few years, and I'm just a civilian and whatnot, I'm just going to try to keep my head down and survive. Why, I may hate the Germans, but why am I going to cause trouble if you think they're going to leave? So by establishing Vichy, well, one, you don't have to, and we'll see what happens to this territory here. You instead of having Free France happen, and which eventually it does, but it takes quite a while. You have Vichy France, Japan gets to sort of Vichy military units throughout the whole World War II stay in Indochina. Just the Japanese come in, the French just put their arms up into their arms lockers and stay in their base and wave at the French or at the Japanese, and if they want to leave their base, they take off their uniform and they go into town and they go back. They're not interred through the whole thing, And when Japan surrenders, the Japanese come to the Vichy, or I don't know, French forces that are there. I don't know if we want to call them Vichy forces, um, and surrender themselves to the French that are, whether down in Saigon or up in Hanoi or wherever, surrender themselves to the French through the whole of the war. Um, they're not interred. They get to get food from the local things. They're not things. So they're not locked up. They're not put in concentration camps or prisoner of war camps. They're just there, and they get to keep their arms. Um, or if Germany had won the war as it appeared in 41, why die for? Well, lost cause. But well, look, I'm contending, and I do believe that if the German people are going, I mean, if the French people are in mass going to fight, Germany can't effectively occupy it because it's just too big of a guerrilla war. If you're going to turn into a guerrilla war, if you're going to do, a Vietnam or an Afghanistan or whatever you want to call it, and you're going to do that, it is not a lost cause, because I don't think it is too big of a population for Germany to control. That's what I'm arguing here. And so whether it's a lost cause, or even if you think Germany's going to lose, but whatever, why get into it? Now, as the war goes on, there is various motivations to get the French people fighting. In 1940, now obviously this happens earlier in 1940, and then through the first half of 1941, with the banning of most political parties, the Communist Party newspaper gets to keep being published, because Stalin says, Hitler be good, you communists, you support the Hitler regime in Paris. So they're, the communists are, hey, Hitler's good, they're controlling it, they're crushing our fellow capitalist enemies. The National Socialists and the International Socialists are working together. Now they've immediately reverse once Hitler goes to war with the Soviet Union, and of course they then start cracking down on the communists in France, and the communist resistance starts really becoming more of a thing. So this is why, not just why die for a lost cause, but it is also just how to manage it. True, but they did take a long time to get the resistance put together and make it effective. Yeah, and it takes quite a while. And you got to realize that they're putting together the resistance in opposition to the French government. Now, we call it the Vichy government, but it's the French government. It is a dictatorship of Marshal Pétain. I don't know how you... Pétain, whatever. It is a dictatorship of him. Now, the last elected government, or at least the cabinet that has been put in place by the last elected government, appoints Pétain a dictator. So it's sort of it isn't like a popularly elected dictator, but he didn't come in as a coup. He didn't come in whether as a military or just, political guys coming in, crashing in, and I'm in charge now. It's more like, hey, Marshall, you save us. We'll the cabinet or whoever, because I don't know if the National Assembly voted on it, but I do know it is some sort of orderly process approved of by the prior government to Pétain coming into power. So it is, that government is realizing things are collapsing. We're going to put Pétain in to save the situation as best it can be saved. I'm sure some people thought maybe he'd keep fighting and somehow turn out to be a victory. Other people will just manage the defeat. However you want to look at it. I'm sure there were different motivations and viewpoints, but so I would say it's a legitimate government. Again, it is not like whether it's military or political overthrow or something that just happens because a bit of the same situation in Denmark. Any resistance was forbidden. Yes, and I talked a lot about that earlier, Beam Slam. Like I said, talked a lot about that in Denmark. So, so you get that. Now, eventually, Pétain more, I don't know. I don't know if he's ever officially removed. And excuse me, that's my mouth here. Um, Laval, Pierre Laval had been and I forget exactly his, and I think premier, at one point prior to the outbreak of the war. He, he's a right wing guy. Um, I don't know if fascist. I don't know enough about him, really, but sort of right wing, and I don't right wing France political figure. He's in is come in as sort of the deputy to Pétain. Eventually, he is dismissed from his post, but then brought back in by the Germans in again, the details are a bit fuzzy in my mind, so I'm probably getting some of this wrong. I think it's after the full occupation, after the Americans take North Africa and Germany rushes in and fully occupies the rest of France. And that is when you really actually start to see significant amounts of resistance actions. I mean, there's always some sort of going on, and the British are trying to, do, special missions along the French coast even earlier, but, really sort of gearing it up. Laval comes back in and is eventually effectively running the French collaborationist government called Vichy. So it does sort of change natures from early Pétain government, who's really actually governing the unoccupied zone and jointly governing, like I would say, the occupied zones with um, Germany. At first, it's very much like the idea of Germans just get to go play war with Britain, and the French will just sort of govern themselves. I would sort of describe that particularly early on. Now, more and more is building, whether it's the West Wall or the submarine pens or other things. More and more German military governors, actual governorships, because they're putting on, exclusion zones and trying to, control them, the coastlines, and especially once the Americans are in the war, it's getting more and more. So it's always, it's a gradual transition, shall we say. But eventually, once you occupy all of France, it's become a situation in which it is now truly a collaborationist government, not a government that is collaborating. It's sort of the difference, because when it's early on, it's sort of like, yeah, like I say, everybody's expectation, including the overwhelming amount of Germans and the overwhelming amount of Frenchmen, that yeah, it may go back to the 1914 boundaries, or it may actually be a little worse for France than that. But Paris and the overwhelming bulk of France, at least at home, is going to go back to being France. Might lose some territory to Italy, but it's mostly going to be okay afterwards. And then, of course, rebuild our army and get everything going again at that point. So and so that is a French government collaborating with Germany, where, like I say later, it is a collaborationist government that is purely a puppet of Germany. And that is when you get lots and lots of resistance. So yeah, it's manpower, it's all kinds of stuff that why you know you want to do this. And um all the oil reserve, French oil reserve, gets turned over to Germany, even if it's in Vichy territory. Lots of mines and other stuff. So yes, we will form this government. Okay. So we now have this. Okay, well, that Irish unit that we were going to go down and fight is no longer visible, so we probably can't go fight that. So, well, you're already heading out. So let's head you north here. Let's head you that way. Let's head you back out. Yes, so we're getting out here. Okay, well, Italy has lost its French colonies, or control of the French colonies down there. Maybe good for Italy in that it can now focus. Oh, we have a landing here by the British. I presume it was a landing. Italy does have some forces back here. They're being pushed. How interesting. And I think we're going to try once we get some forces in place, we're going to try Toy Jet's idea, because I would like to these. Oh, wait a minute. Are these guys leaving? Looks like these guys are leaving. You know, I'm going to right now. Let me just retreat from here, because I would sort of like to try that to eliminate a few British divisions. Looks like the Italians got to keep Corsica. All right. And I think we're going to end this special episode here. Yes. Hello, General Scaven. Good to have you here. So I want to thank everyone again. Hopefully this was an interesting talk on France and the end of France major resistance. We'll be back next time for more, yes, even more parts